Brothers and sisters, welcome back to the Behaviour Revolution Scriptures. My name's Mark and I'm completely frustrated and off my face this morning. I've had everything go wrong. My wife's gone to her mother's for a few hours and taken some of the kids just to see her and have a visit. Some of the kids have gone down to the swimming pool. I've had phone calls saying they can't get in because they're underage, and all this BS has been going on because everybody knows that I'm trying to get to the scriptures this morning and record these amazing things for everybody and get into it because this is where I want to be. So remember last episode we were talking about there's unrest in the spirit realm. Unrest. Everything's going wrong. My laptop, which I normally follow on with the scriptures and record it and have it up here next to me, has just gone kaput this morning. Hard drive's crashed, everything's gone wrong. And so that doesn't work. I've gone down to the salon to borrow my wife's laptop. It's rubbish, it's too slow, it doesn't work, doesn't do anything I want it to do either. So I've just thrown it all away and I'm just going old school. I've got my little phone here and I'm gonna read the scriptures here and I'm gonna add it all later on when I've calmed down. That's my lot this morning. Everything's stopping me from getting to these scriptures. It's been nearly 3 hours and it's been wasted. And I haven't been able to get there. But you know what? We're breaking through and we're getting here and we're going to go on in our story because Satan doesn't want us to go on in this. So, that's my frustration this morning. I'm still calming down, everybody. So, back to Mushah. Mushah's just killed the guy and he's gone off into the wilderness. He didn't go across to Midian straight away though, did he? What we realised last episode, he went down south, down to Cush. He was the king of Cush, the sovereign of Cush for 40 years. And because he wouldn't get involved with their paganism and, sleep with his pagan wife that they obviously gave him, she'd had enough of him and caused a big ruckus in the parliament and they booted him out. So he's left again. So he's in his 60s now. So now this phone's going crap. What's wrong with this phone? See, everything's going wrong this morning. It's all happening. Stop us from going further, guys. We're going further. Stuff them. So, we just saw an amazing clip. Charlton Heston wandering through the wilderness, stripped of everything that he once was, a prince of Egypt, king of Cush. Now he's a nothing, a nobody. He still can't go back to Egypt because he's afraid of the dynasty there, and he's, just a nothing and a nobody of who he thought he was, raised in the grand courts of the king, the pharaoh, and he has no idea who he is, what path he's on, wandering through the wilderness, lost. Who's been there? Hey, I've been there this morning. So, we all understand the fury and the frustration and the being lost and depraved and, just wicked and just lost, absolutely lost. No direction, no path. Everything we thought we once were, everything we were trying to achieve, everything we thought we were and had the right to be, just all, So, and then Yahusha picked us up and carried us, gave us a path, put us on a steadfast, true path, gave us his name, which just completely blew our minds, gave us deliverance, something that we didn't just have to believe in, but it was something we could feel clean and washed, and something that takes us out of our everyday dramas and we just feel amazing. Now I've got a bloody squeaky chair. Ooh! Squeaky noises. The guy was mowing the minute 5 minutes ago when I was about to start, the guy across the road started his lawnmower up. Everything's happening today, guys. Those demons are out of... Calm down, Mark. Oh, get a grip. So we've come to Mushah has gone through the wilderness, as we saw Chuck Heston walking through the wilderness. And he didn't just leave Egypt straight away though. He's been the sovereign of Cush. So he's well into his 60s by now. He's well into his 60s. He's could be considered an old man these days, not some young prince. Let's go, guys. Mushah in Midian. When Mushah arrived in Midian, he sat down beside a well. The pagan priest of Midian had 7 daughters who regularly used the well to draw water and fill the water troughs for their father's flocks. But on this particular day, some ruthless shepherds were trying to chase them away. So Mushah jumped in with his gladiator kung fu fighting moves and rescued the girls from the shepherds. Because remember, he's military trained. He's a soldier. You saw all the fighting and the wars going on in the background of the last video we did. That was Mushah. He went out fighting in battle, and he was a conqueror. So he just stepped in and, fighting moves and rescued the girls from the shepherds. Then he drew water for them all with their flocks, and they were so grateful and thankful that they invited Mushah to come back to their home that day. When the women returned to their father Yithro, he asked, "Why are you back so soon today?" "Dad, an Egyptian rescued us from those wretched shepherds today," they answered. "And then he drew water for us and watered all our flocks." "Well, where is he then?" their father asked. "Why did you leave him out there? Invite him to come and eat with us." Mushah accepted the invitation, and he came and ate a meal with Yithro and his family. And Mushah informed Yithro that he had been a prince of Egypt, but had run away, having been the sovereign of Cush for the last 40 years, but had just recently been removed from government and been sent away in peace with gifts. And Yithro was suspicious and feared an international conflict. So he thought it best to hold Mushah in the family's prison house until he could confirm Mushah's story, since he had run away, and make sure there would be no retaliation. So, we're still living in fairly savage lands here. We didn't want to just take in somebody and cause an international conflict, cause a war or something like that. So they took Mushah and put him in the prison house. So Mushah was held in the prison house, and Yithro's eldest daughter, Zipporah, continually fed him bread and water in secret to keep him alive. But after 10 years had passed, 10 years, you don't hear about all this stuff normally, do you? After 10 years had passed, Zipporah said to her father, "You've kept that poor man bound up for so many years, and not one person has ever come to ask about him, and none of your contacts have ever reported back any deception regarding him. Let's see if he's still alive, and if so, set him free." Because, they couldn't just send an email back then. Did this guy leave you? Is he okay? He couldn't just ask for a reference. What's this guy about? Is he safe? Is he cool? No criminal, is he? Didn't murder anybody? Well, he did, but they couldn't send an email back then. They had to wait. Snail mail and messengers and, So, 10 years had passed. Mushah's just sitting in the family prison house. And obviously would have died. Only Zipporah has been secretly feeding him and keeping him alive. "You've kept that poor man bound up for so many years, and not one person has ever come to ask about him, and none of your contacts have ever reported back any deception regarding him. Let's see if he's still alive, and if so, set him free." "Oh, there's no way a man can stay alive for 10 years without food or water," Yithro said, not knowing that his daughter had been supporting him. "Well, you know very well that the Elohim of the Hebrews has done mighty works for his people before, so let's go see." So everybody knew about the Elohim of the Hebrews. So, and these Midianites are descendants of Shem as well. So they're slightly lighter skinned. They're not black like the Egyptians. So the reason I'm telling you that is because when Mushah eventually marries one of the daughters, he's not into breeding with the nations, because even though they are pagans, they're not covenant people. They are, as far as the bloodline is concerned, they are from the descendants of Shem. So they're not from the cursed line of Ham, which was the nations, which was the Canaanites, Sodom and Gomorrah, Nimrod, So You know very well that the Elohim of the Hebrews has done mighty works for his people before, so let's go see. And when they went to see if Mushah was still alive, they saw him standing in the dungeon, as strong as when he first went in. So 𝗍𝗓𝗏 commanded that Mushah be brought out, washed and dressed in the garments of his family, and they ate bread together. And Mushah settled there with 𝗍𝗓𝗏 and his family. And in the turquoise here, Yahusha had separated Mushah from the sons of Ham, the Egyptians, and brought him back into fellowship with the sons of Shem, the Midianites, like I was saying. Brought him away from the cursed line and brought him into the blessed line. Even though they weren't covenant, 𝗍𝗓𝗏 was a pagan priest. They had lots of deities. But they were descendants of Shem. So as far as the bloodline was concerned, they were from a clean, untampered bloodline. They were just worshipping all the wrong things. But this is the book, remember, this is the book where Yahusha stands up off his throne and lets everyone know that, you know, I've allowed this to go on for long enough. I'm sick of you worshipping all these bloody pagan deities, all these Egyptian and Midianite idols. We've had enough of this. I am the one and only true Elohim of the Israelites, of the Hebrews, of Abraham, Yitzhak, and Yaakov. I am the one and only, and I will be treated as such. So this is the book where this happens, Exodus. Last book, he wasn't so concerned. Well, he probably hated it, but he was dealing with other things. Growing his family, keeping the bloodline clean, that was a big theme. Now it's time for him to, with an outstretched arm, extend the full weight of his authority and show the world who he is. So he's brought Mushah away from the sons of Ham, the Egyptians, and brought him back into fellowship with the sons of Shem, the Midianites. And in time, 𝗍𝗓𝗏 gave Mushah his daughter, Zipporah, to be his wife. And later, when she gave birth to a son, Mushah named him Gershom, for he said, I am still a stranger in a foreign land. Interesting, isn't it? Even though he's been a king of Cush for 40 years, and now he's been in Midian, well, obviously for a few years, they've had a child, he still feels like a stranger. He's still, I think I mentioned this later on, so I'll wait for that. He's still not over his past. So 𝗍𝗓𝗏 gave Mushah his daughter. They had a son, Gershom, and he called him that because he said, I am still a stranger in a foreign land. And he did not circumcise his foreskin on the 8th day, because 𝗍𝗓𝗏 had commanded him not to. 𝗍𝗓𝗏 didn't care about the covenant made with Abraham, carried on through Yitzhak and Yaakov into Israel. He didn't care about that. Just because he's from the clean bloodline doesn't mean he had, clean behavior or clean beliefs. He was a pagan, worshipping witchcraft. So, Mushah hadn't been in Egypt for over 50 years. Mushah hadn't been in Egypt for over 50 years, but he was still so held back by who he thought he was, royalty. So held back that he named his son Stranger. Remember, names back here mean something. It's not just throw letters up in the air and watch where they land, like people do today. It's not like that. Names mean something back here. And he's called his son Gershom, which means I am a stranger. He still doesn't feel like he fits in. He still feels like he's still not over his past. Mushah hadn't been in Egypt for over 50 years, but he was still so held back by who he thought he was, the royalty, that he named his son Stranger because he felt so out of place in Midian. And now he was a shepherd, which was the lowliest looked down upon occupation, according to the Egyptians, which would be the best way for Yahusha to train him to be a servant and shepherd of his chosen people. But he had to overcome the pride of Egypt, the world, still in him first. He had to there's so many gems in this thing. I mean, just in my life, I was trained as a hairdresser 20 years ago, trained in hairdressing, and that's a servant industry. Prior to that, I wanted to be a rock star. I had my head up my own ass and I was just deluded. Wasn't even that good a singer and crazy. And so Yahusha brought me into a low, compared to all the other occupations, a more lowly profession, to make me a servant, to train me how to relate to people, how to talk to people, how to put myself off and be a servant, really. That's what we teach the kids who are coming into hairdressing. This is a servant industry. You've got to put yourself off and be a servant, you know. So that was a good occupation for me to learn that. Mushah's been put into being a shepherd, which was the lowliest. You know, they looked down. The Egyptians hated the Hebrews, those filthy Hebrews. They're dirty shepherd people. We're cattle people. We're cattle people, cattle ranchers. These filthy shepherds, here they come. So Mushah had become a shepherd, which was just so lowly, because he was royalty. You can still see, and then he went to being a sovereign of Cush. So he had this high opinion of himself. He named his own son Stranger. You know, he put his own isolation and his own pride onto his son as his name. So you see, all this stuff means a lot, things that we're going through. This would be the best way for Yahusha to train him to be a servant and shepherd of his chosen people. But he had to overcome the pride of Egypt, which was the grandest, most technological advanced nation on the earth. And now he's dwelling in tents with these filthy little shepherds, you know. He had to overcome his pride. And for us today, that's the world. Egypt always represents the world. Pharaoh is the enemy. Pharaoh is ● the representation, the shadow, and Egypt is the world. And we have to overcome all that which is in us. And that's what we've been going through this Feast of Booths, remember? Overcoming the flesh. Instead of fasting in the natural, overcome the world. Get that fleshly behavior out of us. That thing that we're in that wants to control us. We have to take control of it. What's the scripture? Greater is the man that can control himself than the man that can control cities and nations. That's what we have to do, brothers and sisters. This is what Mushah, it shows us that this is the process Yahusha takes people on. He takes them into the wilderness alone. That doesn't mean you wander off. You don't run away from everybody in the natural. You don't just, oh, I've found Yahusha, I'm leaving. Wives, husbands, children, jobs. You don't just run away from it. Inside yourself, you go on a wilderness journey, because everything that you once thought was okay, acceptable, clean, okay way to behave, just gets cleansed. Yahusha starts throwing things, moving things around inside his home, inside his dwelling place, and it hurts. The ◍𝗓𝗓s come out. He's cutting you away from things you once felt passionate about, you're not interested in. You know, like you just want him more and more and more. It's like he's a drug, an amazing, intoxicating. His esteem and his anointing is just intoxicating. That's all we want. So that's how he leads us and guides us, following that cloud. We haven't come to that yet, but this is the process for everybody, guys. We go out into the wilderness to be trained by Yahusha. Taken out from the world, inside ourselves. Stay in your job, stay in your marriage, stay with your children. Who else is going to be a light to them if you run away? You can handle it. He won't put too much on you that you can't handle. So, I think we've covered that paragraph enough. It's amazing, the similarities between Mushah and us today. It's the same process. He had to get over himself. You got to get over that, mate. You're not a prince anymore. Get your head out of your ass. And, you know, look, you've got a wife, you've got a child. You're not some prince, you know. Come and shepherd the sheep with me. This is maybe what his father-in-law said behind the scenes. Come on, mate. You ain't any of those things anymore. I've been a prisoner for 10 years in my prison house. So, Zipporah had another son, and Mushah called him Eleazar, saying, "The Elohim of my fathers was my help and deliverance from the sword of the Pharaoh." Like Yusuf, Mushah married into a pagan culture also. However, the Midianites were still from the line of Shem, so they were distant cousins of Israel anyway. The Midianites worshipped many idols and deities, including Baal and Asherah, which is the sun, tree, zodiac worship. And I'm not going to go into that right now. It's not completely relevant to this video. We can go into that later on, I think, for those of you who aren't familiar with, most of you know about all this stuff. It's the thing you hear about generally first, the paganism of Christianity and fossilized customs. If you haven't read Fossilized Customs, that's an amazing book you should read. It teaches you all about this stuff that Yahusha hates and the ancient pagan sun worship, tree worship, zodiac, Mazzaroth worship, that's just normal behavior today in the 21st century, and where to come out of it. So that's what Yithro was into, that's what Egypt was into, and now that's what Yisrael was into as well, because they were infiltrated with the nations, remember? So we're going to leave Mushah for a little while now, because that's where he's at. He's just been cut off from everything and everyone. He's come out of Egypt, became a king of Cush for 40 years, then he's wandered in the wilderness some more, all the way around. And it's not, look at the map. Put the map up for a minute, Mark. Here we go. Look at the map. So it's no great feat. You can't get from Cush. You can't get from Cush the other way around, because there's a big ocean there. So he would have had to go up north again and around through the wilderness, and that's how he knew the way to the promised land. That's how he knew. Yahusha was preparing him the whole time. So guys, when you look at it, 40 years, and then it's a few more years now after that, because he's had 2 children. All this time, Yahusha's been preparing Mushah. How many years since you met Yahusha? Because that's really when your journey begins. I mean, we might have been delivered by the blood. We might have had the word in us and been changed even when we were in Christianity or Judaism, but it's not the same. It's not the same transformation. It's not the same deliverance as when the name of Yahusha comes inside you, written upon your forehead. The blood delivers you. It's not the same thing. Even though your life might have changed through the power of the word, even if the names were different, your journey really began when you got immersed in the name of Yahusha. And how many years ago was that, guys? Mine was about 15 or so, I'd say. Well, Mushah has been on this path for 45, 50 years. 50 years since he left Egypt. And Yahusha's been preparing him that whole time. And we're still whinging and complaining that things don't go right after what? 1 year, 2 years, 10 years, 15 years? Yahusha has us in the palm of his hand, leading us and guiding us. He knows exactly when he's coming back. We don't. We're not allowed to know that. We have to prepare. That's the whole purpose. He's preparing us, takes us out into the wilderness, reasoning with us, He's doing all this with Mushah, and he's doing all this with us. He's doing this with you. That's why your life is the way it is. Don't go blaming demons all the time. I know I had a big rant about the demons at the beginning of this video, but most of the time it's Yahusha getting our attention. So don't go blaming demons all the time. Demons are always there. Spiritual attack is always there. Yeah, it's always on me all the time not to do these videos. Stuff always comes up around the way. But Yahusha is there also trying to get our attention, Keep going forward, he says. Keep going. Put that off and run. Put this one off and run. You've got something else hidden under your tent there in the folds of your tent. Put that off and run. Run your race. Anyway, we're going to leave Mushah for a little while now, because our next heading is, we're going right back to Egypt. The Pharaoh's leprous death. Back in Egypt, the Pharaoh was struck down with leprosy from Yahusha for dealing so treacherously with his chosen people. Don't forget, all these little bits and pieces you may not have heard of in the canon are from Yasha, Jubilees, Enoch, places like that, apocryphal books that I've added in, the bits that I find intriguing and relevant to the deliverance. We're on a path of deliverance here, the blood covenant of deliverance. If it ties in with that, I've added it just to expound on the story. So back in Egypt, let's go back to Egypt. The Pharaoh was struck down with leprosy from Yahusha for dealing so treacherously with his chosen people. And at the instruction of his sorcerers, the Pharaoh ordered for his wounds to be cleansed by the blood of a newborn Hebrew baby in order to heal his leprosy. The blood of a newborn Hebrew baby. They're still after the Hebrew babies. So each day for almost a year, a newborn Hebrew baby was taken from her mother's arms, or his his or her mother's arms, slaughtered, and its blood was applied to the Pharaoh's wounds. What about that? That's still happening today. We see conspiracy theories, which I don't believe are theories. I believe it completely. I don't go on about it, but I just know it's wicked out there. But, you know, you hear about the elite, the billionaires, the trillionaires, they, you know, sacrificing babies at their crazy underground worship services and things like that. The blood of babies being put into the fetuses of babies, and fetus matter and all this sort of stuff being put in the food. And there's a big rampage against mankind. 𝗪𝗓 hates the world and everybody in it. And if he can destroy the population before they're even born, it's one less person he doesn't have to attack after they're born, isn't it? So look at this. Each day for almost a year, a newborn Hebrew baby was taken from its mother's arms, slaughtered, and its blood was applied to the Pharaoh's wounds. But eventually the skin disease overcame the Pharaoh, and his flesh began to stink, like the rank flesh of a carcass left out in the hot sun for days. And after 3 years of this, the Pharaoh died with terror, shame, and disgust. And the servants buried him as quickly as possible in a king's sepulchre. But they couldn't embalm him, as was usual for a king, because the stench of his flesh was so horridly putrid that they couldn't approach him. This was the fair punishment placed on him by Yahusha for his evil treatment of the Israelites. So you don't get away with nothing with Yahusha. It may look like it, and I've lost track now of how many years they've been in slavery, the Israelites, but this guy who overtook the throne and became the Pharaoh and kicked out the Shemite sovereign and became the tyrannic Pharaoh of Egypt and enslaved Yisrael, has been doing this for a fair while now. And because of this, actually look at the storyline. We know it's been for a while because Mushah was in Cush for 40 years. So day in and day out, the Israelites, remember, were crying out in misery and agony, in oppression, being beaten, whipped, enslaved, raped, bashed, murdered. That's Israel, and this Pharaoh has been allowing this. So this is his punishment. He didn't just die. He wasn't just wiped out. He had a skin disease that was rotting his flesh over the course of 3 years. And what did he do to try and heal it? Slaughter babies and rub baby blood all over him. So even that's disgusting. That's violating Yahusha's commands as well, which he didn't care about. So that's an interesting statement there. This was fair punishment. Not even revenge, just fair. That's fair. This hideous way to die. The servants couldn't even go near him because he was just so rank, This was just fair punishment. Yahusha considered that fair. Before the Pharaoh died, he left all power to his son. And when this changeover occurred, the children of Israel breathed a sigh of relief, thinking his son would be more lenient with them. But they couldn't have been more wrong. This new Pharaoh had even more hatred, bitterness, and racism in him than his father had. And he increased his labor force over Israel. So this would have been one of the Ramses, I'd say. Most of the movies call him Ramses. I don't know if that's historically correct. Don't really care either. But we'll just keep calling him Pharaoh. So his son was even worse than he was. So the Israelites thought, finally there's a changeover. Maybe maybe he'll cut us some slack. No, it was even worse. There's a picture here. This evil man was raised up in this exact spot in history for the sole purpose of Yahusha demonstrating his divine power and revealing his name to the world. In fact, this is the whole reason he sent his people into Egypt in the first place, to allow them to mix with the nations and become infected by their idolatry, so that he could show them his deliverance and return them to his covenant path all to push his redemptive name out into the world. This was his plan. So we can't say, oh, why did he send them in there? You know, why did he do that? Why did he allow, you know, I've seen posts like that. Why did he allow the murder of all the babies? Why didn't he just strike down the Pharaoh and be done with it and not have all this murder? Like it's always Yahusha's fault. It's always Yahusha. Everything that goes on in this world is Yahusha's fault. Oh, if Yahusha's so, you know, wonderful, why does he allow children to die and starve and all this sort of stuff? Like it's his fault, you know? It's insane, that theory, you know? Yahusha has a plan. Mankind is doing to each other what mankind does to each other. And Yahusha is drawing out those that want him. So he had a whole plan. This evil man was raised up in this exact spot in history. Not a coincidence. He was raised up in this exact spot for the sole purpose of Yahusha demonstrating his divine power. He didn't really do that in our last book of Genesis. He's standing up, sort of, to illustrate his divine power and reveal his name to the world. In fact, this is the whole reason he sent his people into Egypt in the first place, to allow them to mix with the nations, because they were trying to get in there all the time anyway. Jacob, you know, all his sons were always trying to run into the nations, get involved with the cities in the idolatry and the paganism. They're always trying to run in there, so you know what, it was time. So Yahusha said, okay, here we go. We're going, I'll let you. Door's open, go for it. That's what you want, have it. Since it's so wonderful, worshipping idols outside my covenant, go for it and see what life is like. And what happened? What happened to their wonderful lives when they started intermixing with the Egyptians? They didn't have his protection, did they? So, life out there off this path, for any of you who might get tempted to leave, you know, we might go through hell on this walk with Yahusha and be persecuted and hated because of Yahusha, but is it any different out there? Aren't you hated and go through turmoil and heartbreak? And imagine going through that without knowing that you're protected. Imagine going through that without having a safety net. Yahusha's my safety net. The things I go through now, at least I know that it's for a reason, and if it's something stupid I did, well, let's change it, get rid of it, overcome it. But if it's something that other people are doing, spirits that are coming into the home, the evil that comes into the home through the kids, through myself, wife, through the business, at least you know it's because Yahusha is in us, and you know, he's the one who's hated, not us. He said that. As if you'd leave. Oh, how devastating would that be? How could you even sleep at night? Whew. Anyway, the point of this picture is to say that there's no accidents, there's no, you know, coincidence. This all happened right now in history for a purpose. This tyrant was raised up even worse than his father, and look what happened to his father. This tyrant was raised up right at the exact spot in time for Yahusha to demonstrate his divine power and show them his deliverance and return them to his covenant path, all to push his redemptive name out into the world. That's what it was all about, his name. One of the huge themes of this book is his name. So day in and day out, the nation of Israel continued to groan under their agonizing burden of slavery. They mourned and cried out for help, and Yahusha heard their distress and torture, and he remembered his blood covenant promise to Abraham, Yitzhak, and Jacob. So, looking down on the people of Israel, he was jealous for his people and his inheritance, and he knew it was the appointed time to deliver them and bring them back to the land of Canaan to be his treasured possession. He knew it was time. Other translations say he remembered. What, did he forget? No. That's that big word I keep forgetting. Putting human-like characteristics onto Yahusha so that we can understand him. Otherwise, we couldn't even grasp who he is, what his being is like. We have to talk about him in human terms so that our mind can just fathom him. So he didn't remember, he didn't forget, even though it said in the original ones that he remembered. It was the time. It was the appointed time. Everything's done in appointed times. Moedim. Remember we went through that word a couple of episodes ago? The Moedim. The appointed times. Everything is done by Yahusha in an appointed time. Not by accident, not when he's ready, not when he wakes up and, oh, well, gee, I forgot about them. No, it's an appointed time, like setting the oven timer. Just goes, okay, now this Pharaoh's been raised up, ready, set, go. I've had enough of this. I want my people back, because despite what we think about Yahusha, he's not up there judging us and furious and angry at us. Not his bride. He loves his bride. He's jealous for his bride. This whole earth exists because he wanted a covenant home and a bride. Why wasn't he satisfied with the cherubim, the seraphim, the angelic, interdimensional beings that he'd created, the throne room scene, all these four-headed, four-eyed, all these creatures, whatever they are? Why wasn't he satisfied with all that? Who knows? But he wasn't. He wanted a family that would choose him. That's why this whole creation exists. I found that interesting. We often forget how much he loves us. He loves us. When we do the wrong thing, we are hurting him. Oh, he's just angry at me again. No, it's just like a parent. They get angry at us, but it doesn't mean we can't hurt them. He's the one who started this, not us. He chose us. We didn't choose him. He chose us first. Even when we were in our most lowliest, disgusting, filthiest state, he saw us and he pulled us out and put us on the path. And how long's your path been going on for? The deliverance path of everything you've come out of. How long have you been on that path? Mushah's been on it for 50 odd years now. Even longer, because it was since he was born. It was a good thing when he was born. It was an appointed time. It was 𝗪𝗪𝗪, remember, when Mushah was born. Just like it was an appointed time with the first ark that delivered people through the flood. The second ark that Mushah was in, an appointed time. So everything happens in an appointed time. And we know that everything's in an appointed time because we're going to come in another couple of episodes, we're going to come into the first official appointed time in Egypt of Passover. So everything's done in an appointed time, guys. Know that in your own life. The Moedim in your life. I know there's the grand 7 major redemptive feasts each year, but every day, every week, every year in your life, there are appointed times that Yahusha is doing things in your life. Not by accident. You can't rush them, you can't speed them up. We could put all our heartfelt energy and everything into overcoming. You can't get there any quicker than you can get there. And Yahusha knows how fast you can get there. So there's no point looking at the people next to you and going, oh, they're running faster than me or slower than me, because you don't know where they are, what's inside them, where they've had to come from, and what Yahusha's doing to bring them along the path. He's doing the same thing in everybody. Like the trees, Christopher told me years ago, he planted all these trees and some of them are growing faster than others. And you look at them and you get frustrated. You think, oh, what's wrong with this tree and this tree? But at the end, they're all the same. In the end, they're in a hedge. They all get to the same point, in the end. Some just look like they're taking their time, but in the end, they're all a hedge. They all catch up. Like us, we're all jagged, rough-assed pieces of stone. And in the end, rubbing us against each other and against things in the world and polishing us, we will become lively stones, smooth stones that will fit together into the New Jerusalem. So, and he says that when he's building the tabernacle and other things, don't use any smooth stones in my altar. I want raw stones, raw, realistic, earthly, rough-ass pieces of stone, just like us, rough-ass. Calls us, puts his ruach in us, to astound the wise, those who think they're wise, those who think they're teachers, preachers, pastors, rabbis. They hear things that we say, and we're nobody, nothings, and I'm just an idiot from Australia, and with a silly accent, you probably all think, and he's put stuff in me, so I'm saying it. Move along, Marky, move along, mate. Let's go. Actually, that's what we're up to today. That's all we're going to talk about. Yahusha stood up. He'd had enough. He was jealous for his people and his inheritance, and he knew it was the appointed time to deliver them and bring them back to the land of Canaan to be his treasured possession. Other translations say, and he knew what? He knew what they were going through. He knew it was the time. He loved them. He was jealous for them. It was time to redeem his people. So we're going to leave it there today, brothers and sisters. Like I said before, your path is your path. Other brothers and sisters have come in to help you, assist you, parents, wives, husbands, children, everybody stepped in and out of your life. You're on the path you're in. But don't ever forget what your path is between you and Yahusha. It's your personal testimony, your personal journey from darkness into light, where Yahusha met you, how it all happened. Dwell on these things, because Yahusha said later on in the books that his emissaries wrote, they overcame the dragon by the blood of the Lamb and the word of their testimony. Was that just going telling people their testimony? No. Inside them, their testimony meant something to them, where they'd been, what they'd done, all the things they'd done wrong. There's testimony, there's power in that, because all the things you've done wrong are the influence of the enemy and our wicked desires and evil nature. And so those things that we come out of, they're your testimony. They're the word of your witness. So the witness of what Yahusha's done in your life. And remember, what he's done in your life is to take back his dwelling place. Remember, because the only place the dimensions are to get aligned, the only place Yahusha dwells on this earth is in his dwelling place. And there is no dwelling place made with earthly hands on this earth anymore. If you see anybody trying to build one or declare that they have Yahusha there or whatever, he doesn't dwell in any of those buildings. He dwells in these living dwelling places that he created. Our bodies, we are the living tabernacles, the living dwelling places of his Ruach. We have a down payment of his Ruach in us, which we have to exercise, run our race, overcome. So just as Mushah had to overcome Egypt, the Egypt that was still in him after 50 years. I'm only 42, Mushah had left Egypt 50 years ago and he still couldn't get over it, what he'd been through. He had a troubled upbringing, being a child of both Hebrew and Egyptian, never really fitting into either. He would have seen all the cruelty going on. He would have been sympathetic, apathetic to it. When he was with his Hebrew family, he would have not known where to fit in. He couldn't say anything about either. He was in the middle, And then of course it all came to a climactic ending when he murdered somebody. And most of us wouldn't know the burden of that kind of evil behaviour, hopefully. Some of us might. You might have murdered somebody. Yahusha can forgive us of those things, but the burden of that would have been phenomenal. Killing, taking another life. Yahusha says that. Don't do it. And then he wandered in the wilderness. 50 years since he left Egypt, he still wasn't over who he thought he was. Are you over who you think you are? Are you over who you think you are? All the things you've been and done and said? Or are you still trying to bring them up all the time like they were a good thing? There's nothing wrong with talking about, experiences you've had in your life, but is the feeling you have behind them like that it was good? Like how, check out how amazing I was, I did this and I said that. Or do you recognize that you were wicked, evil, lost, broken, sick, mental, completely depraved? Do you face who you were, or do you think you were a good person back then? Have you just passed from light into light? Do you face that was darkness? That's where we've all come from, brothers and sisters. If you can't face the darkness you've come from, then how can you appreciate the light? You're in a delusion. We're all broken. Anything we hold up to Yahusha and say, oh, this is why you really want to know, this is why Yahusha chose me, because of all the things that are holding up these filthy rags to Yahusha. we have no reason why Yahusha's chosen us. Anything we now possess as a quality he's given us, nothing good of our flesh. There's nothing we can do in our flesh that's any good. Nothing. And if we say that we did it, if we try to get recognition for it, who really cares anyway? Does anybody really let you have it and say, oh, that was amazing, you're so amazing, and da-da-da-da-da. You know, do they? Nobody. What are you looking for it for? It's boring. He gives us the reward. He is who we're looking to get the next good thing from him, to do it. That's how good works. Do things unto good works. So when the scripture says we are redeemed unto good works, we are delivered unto good works. No, we're not delivered by our good works. We are delivered so that we can do good works, not to earn our salvation, not to earn our deliverance. We've already been delivered back here. We are doing the good works because we want to please Yahusha. And a good work, definition of a good work, is anything Yahusha tells you to do, and you do it. Anything Yahusha tells you to behave, you do it. Anything Yahusha tells you to think upon, do, behave, anything like that. They're the fruits that we bring forth, the good works. So I hope these, I'm really excited reading about Mushah, because it's really a lot of fun putting all the footage up behind me. He's the most popular guy in scripture as far as finding movies to put behind me, but just the depth of experience that he's gone through. And he hasn't even done anything yet, apart from murdered someone and wandered around and, gotten married and had 2 kids. He hasn't done anything yet, and look what he's been through. And he's nearly, what is he doing? He's in 70. He'd be pushing 70 by now. So these stories are blowing my brains, guys, and I hope they are too, and you too. And I'll be back next episode, because we're going to go and see the burning bush. Mushah has his first encounter with Yahusha. Love yous. Bye-bye.